Alexander Blackwood observed Newport City's skyline from his penthouse office. His steely gray eyes were fixed on the stream of traffic 40 stories below. At 42, he had built Blackwood Securities into one of the most formidable cybersecurity firms in the Midwest. The corner office of the Glass and Steel Tower served as a reminder of how far he had come from his foster care days. "Mr. Blackwood." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Samuel Drake is here to see you. Send him in." Without turning from the view, Alexander replied. The soft click of the door announced Samuel's arrival. "You're going to want to see this," Samuel said, his military bearing evident in his rigid posture. The former Special Forces operator placed a tablet on Alexander's desk, his face grim. Alexander turned, noting the tension in Samuel's shoulders. Their relationship went beyond employer and head of security. Samuel had been cleared of corporate espionage charges 3 years ago, thanks to Alexander's intervention, a debt that had forged an unshakable loyalty between them. "What am I looking at?" Alexander asked, picking up the tablet. "Unusual patterns in your personal accounts, small transfers. Nothing obvious at first glance, but they're there," Samuel explained, pointing to a series of highlighted transactions. "Someone's testing the waters." Alexander's expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened imperceptibly. "How long?" he inquired. "Started 3 weeks ago. Whoever it is, they're careful and professional. Keep monitoring. Don't alert anyone else," Samuel instructed. Alexander set the tablet down, not even mentioning Isabella. Samuel nodded in understanding of the implication. "There's something else. Isabella has been meeting someone at the Aurora Hotel. Twice last week." Alexander leaned back in his chair, memories of Henry Collins's lessons surfacing. His last foster father had taught him the value of patience when dealing with betrayal. Collins's systematic dismantling of his unfaithful wife's life had been a masterclass in revenge. "Your instructions?" Samuel asked. "Surveillance only. I want everything. Photos, videos, account access, phone records, but maintain distance. If they spot us, it's over." "Understood," Samuel replied as he moved toward the door, then paused. "Alexander, I'm sorry." "Don't be," Alexander replied. "Just do your job." After Samuel left, Alexander pulled up a photo on his phone. Him and Isabella at their wedding 8 years ago. She had been radiant, her family's disapproval only strengthening their bond. Or so he had thought. The intercom buzzed again. "Detective Martinez is on line 1. Alexander picked up the phone. "Alexander, this is Sarah. What do I owe the pleasure?" she said tensely. "We need to talk," she continued. "Off the record. The usual place. In 30 minutes. Alexander grabbed his coat, his mind already formulating contingencies. The cafe where he met Sarah was small, tucked away on a side street where the financial district bowled into older neighborhoods. She was already there when he arrived, a case file on the table. "You're not going to like this," she said as he sat down. Sarah Martinez had risen to head the financial crimes unit through sheer determination. Her friendship with Alexander had started as a professional relationship when Blackwood Securities consulted on a major fraud case. She slid several surveillance photos across the table. These had been taken at various galleries over the past month. "Notice anything?" she asked. Alexander studied the images. Isabella appeared in several, standing close to a young man with artist's hands and calculated charm. "Who is he?" he inquired. "Sebastian Rivera. He's on our radar for art-related fraud in Europe." "Nothing concrete yet, but there's smoke," Sarah explained, leaning forward. "Alexander, Isabella has been spending a lot of time with him. The kind of time that raises flags in my unit." "What kind of fraud are we talking about?" Alexander asked. "High-end art scams, forgeries, money laundering through galleries. His brother Diego runs an operation in Valencia." Sarah paused. "There's more. Your wife's gallery has been making unusual transactions. Small amounts, spread out." Alexander's expression darkened. The same pattern is showing up in my accounts. You knew. Samuel flagged it this morning, she replied. Alexander's voice was cold. How long have you been watching them? 3 weeks. I wanted to be sure before coming to you, Sarah replied, hesitating. Alexander, given our friendship, I shouldn't be showing you this, but after what you did for my unit last year, I appreciate it. Alexander stood, leaving enough cash to cover both their coffees. Send everything you have to Samuel. And Sarah. This conversation never happened. Back at his office, Alexander received a text from Isabella. Working late at the gallery. Don't wait up. He typed back, no problem. Love you. His expression remained unchanged as he deleted the message thread. Elena Vargas, Isabella's assistant at the gallery, was waiting in Alexander's office when he returned. Her presence wasn't surprising. He had arranged this meeting through back channels. Mr. Blackwood, Elena's voice trembled slightly. I wasn't sure about coming here, but you did. Why? Because what they're doing is wrong, and I've seen where this leads. Alexander replied. Elena twisted her hands in her lap. 5 years ago in Seville, I was involved in something similar. A man died. Alexander leaned forward. Tell me everything. Elena's story poured out. A tragic tale of art fraud, betrayal, and consequences. By the time she finished, Alexander had a clearer picture of what he was facing. You're doing the right thing, he assured her. I'll need your help moving forward. Can I count on you? Elena nodded, tears in her eyes. Just please be careful. And remember, she added, Sebastian Rivera isn't who he appears to be. After she left, Alexander made a call to Anastasia Stavros, the shipping magnate whose cybersecurity contract was worth millions to Blackwood Securities. Anastasia, I need information on the Rivera brothers. Everything you have. This is sensitive territory, my friend. Anastasia's accent was thick with concern. They have connections you don't want to disturb. I'm already disturbed. Names, dates, operations, everything. Give me 48 hours, Alexander instructed. Anastasia paused, then said, Alexander, if this is going where I think it is, be prepared for war. Alexander ended the call and opened his laptop, beginning to move assets into secured accounts. He left just enough in the joint accounts to appear normal, a bait for a trap, not yet sprung. Samuel Drake entered without knocking, his face ashen. Sir, you need to see this. The surveillance photo showed Isabella and Sebastian in an intimate embrace outside the Aurora Hotel. Alexander studied them without emotion, his foster father's voice echoing in his memory. Revenge isn't served cold, boy. It's served at precisely the right temperature. Your orders, Samuel asked. Set up a war room. I want everything we have on Sebastian Rivera, his brother, and their operation. And Samuel called Rachel Chen, the lawyer. I thought she hated you. She did, but now she owes me. Alexander turned back to the window. It's time to remind everyone why crossing me is a terminal mistake. Sebastian Rivera's studio apartment in Crescent Park buzzed with the energy of Newport City's contemporary art scene. Paint-splattered canvases lined the exposed brick walls, each piece carefully crafted to appeal to wealthy collectors' current tastes. But the real masterpieces weren't on display. They were hidden in a false wall panel, waiting to be unveiled at precisely the right moment. The wife is hooked. Sebastian spoke into his phone as he mixed paint with precise movements. But the husband, he's different from the others. Be careful, Hamano. Diego Rivera's voice crackled from Valencia. I've heard things about Alexander Blackwood. He's not some rich fool we can easily deceive. Sebastian laughed, studying a photo of Isabella he had taken secretly at the gallery. Trust me, she's ready to ruin her entire life for this. You should see how she looks at me. That's what worries me. The passionate ones are unpredictable. Diego paused. The forgeries will be ready next week. Perfect copies, just like always. Good, Sebastian replied. She's already helped me identify potential buyers through the gallery. Rich idiots who wouldn't know real art if it bit them. Sebastian added a subtle brushstroke to his latest work. Once the deals are done, we disappear. Same as always, he murmured. Then he added, and the wife. She thinks we're running away together. That insufferable woman with daddy issues. They're all the same. After ending the call, Sebastian reviewed his notes on Isabella Blackwood. The private investigator's report had been worth every penny, detailing accounts of her marriage's weak points, her strained relationship with her wealthy family, and her desperate need for validation beyond her curator role. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Isabella entered, her designer outfit out of place in his carefully crafted, struggling artist's studio. I missed you, she breathed, pressing against him. At 35, Isabella Blackwood possessed the refined beauty of old money, enhanced by carefully chosen procedures that maintained her youthful appearance. I've been thinking about you too, Sebastian murmured, playing his role perfectly. About us, Alexander is leaving for Metro City next week for a big client meeting. Isabella ran her fingers through Sebastian's artfully tousled hair. We'll have more time together. Time isn't enough anymore. Sebastian stepped back, his expression tortured. I can't keep sharing you, Isabella. It's killing me. Sebastian, you know it's complicated. The gallery, my family's foundation. We could leave, she pleaded. Start fresh somewhere else. I have connections in Miami. Buyers interested in my work, he countered. Isabella's eyes widened. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything. Sebastian took her hands, noting how they trembled. But we need resources. Starting over isn't cheap. I have access to accounts. No, Sebastian pulled away, adding another layer to his performance. I couldn't ask you to sacrifice everything. It was just a dream. Sebastian, wait. Isabella grabbed his arm. What if I want to sacrifice everything? What if you're worth it? He turned back slowly, hiding his triumph behind a mask of vulnerable hope. You would do that? Leave everything behind for me? Yes. Isabella kissed him fiercely. I've never felt this alive. With Alexander, everything is so controlled, so calculated. You make me feel young again. Sebastian held her close, shooting a quick glance at his phone on the table to ensure it was recording. Evidence was always useful, especially with targets like Isabella's Blackwood. Across town, Alina Vargas sat in her small apartment in Cedar Grove, staring at a photo from her past. The young man in the image had died because of a scam similar to what she now saw unfolding at the gallery. Her hand shook as she dialed a number. Mr. Blackwood, there's something else you need to know. Sebastian has been making copies of the gallery's client lists. And Isabella, she's been changing dates on provenance documents. Alexander's voice was calm. Are you certain? Yes, I've seen the documents myself, Alina replied, clutching the phone tighter. There's more. They're planning something big. Isabella has been asking questions about the galleries and insurance policies. You've done well, Alina. Keep watching and report anything unusual directly to me. After hanging up, Alina poured herself a drink, remembering Seville and the price of silence. Not this time. This time she chose to take a stand. Meanwhile, at the Harrison family estate, Diana Harrison reviewed security footage from her family's art foundation. Her brother-in-law's cybersecurity firm had recently upgraded their systems, providing her with access that Isabella wasn't aware of. Oh, sister, Diana murmured, watching Isabella and Sebastian meet in supposedly secured areas after hours. What are you getting yourself into? The foundation's attorney had already flagged several suspicious transactions linked to Isabella's department. Diana couldn't prove anything yet, but her instincts, honed by years in the art world, screamed danger. A text illuminated her phone. We need to talk, Alexander, it read. Diana responded immediately. Tomorrow, the usual place. I have something you need to see. In his studio, Sebastian received a message from his brother. Problem. Some of our Valencia contacts are asking questions about Blackwood Securities. This guy's connected, Sebastian. Maybe we should pull out. Sebastian deleted the message, confident in his plan. He had done this dozens of times across Europe. American targets were always easier, too trusting, and too eager to believe in love, art, and passion. Isabella's perfume lingered in his studio as he reviewed their next steps. The account number she provided would be useful, but the real prize was access to the Harrison Foundation's collection. With Isabella's help, switching originals for Diego's forgeries would be simple. Just a few more weeks, he promised himself, adding the final touches to a painting that would never see a legitimate gallery. Then we disappear, and Alexander Blackwood learns what it means to lose everything. He didn't notice the tiny camera lens hidden in his studio's ventilation grill, or the fact that every word he had spoken had been transmitted to a secure server in Blackwood Securities' basement. Alexander Blackwood sat in the FBI Newport City field office, his attention focused on the Cybercrime Division's presentation. The meeting room buzzed with federal agents and corporate security experts, all gathered to discuss a new wave of sophisticated financial fraud cases. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Isabella. He ignored it, maintaining his focus on the federal agent's explanation of recent attack patterns. Samuel Drake, seated beside him, shifted slightly, a prearranged signal that everything was proceeding according to plan. The text notification buzzed again and again. Finally, during a brief break, Alexander checked his phone. The message made his lip curl imperceptibly. "Bye, you fool. Me and my longtime boyfriend are taking your money to Metro City. Don't try to look for us, or you'll regret everything." He typed back with deliberate calm. "Enjoy. Good luck with that." Samuel leaned close, whispering, "She just accessed the joint account minus 80,000, transferred to an offshore holding company." Alexander nodded slightly, returning his attention to the presentation. Inside, he savored the moment. Isabella had no idea that her secret offshore account had been compromised weeks ago, its routing numbers carefully manipulated to feed directly into a monitored holding company. "Mr. Blackwood," the FBI's cybercrime unit chief addressed him, "given your firm's experience with art-related financial fraud, what patterns should we be watching for?" Alexander stood, straightening his tie. "Actually, I believe I can provide a real-time example," he said. He nodded to Samuel, who distributed sealed folders to the assembled agents. "What you're about to see is an active fraud operation involving international art theft, money laundering, and corporate espionage," Alexander announced. The agents opened their folders, with memos of interest filling the room as they reviewed the evidence Alexander had been gathering for months. Surveillance photos, bank transfers, intercepted communications, a complete documentation of Isabella and Sebastian's activities. This case intersected with several of their ongoing investigations. Alexander continued his presentation, particularly the Rivera brothers' operations in Europe. Every transaction, every meeting, every phone call has been documented and verified. You'll find everything meets federal evidence standards. Agent Thompson demanded, "You've been sitting on this intelligence." "Not sitting, building," Alexander replied smoothly. The FBI's art crime specialist whistled softly as he reviewed the files. "This is incredible. We've been trying to nail the Rivera operation for years. Consider it my contribution to justice," Alexander said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some personal matters to attend to," he added. Outside the federal building, Rachel Chen waited in her Mercedes. The daughter of a businessman, Edward Kane, who had been destroyed years ago, had transformed her initial hatred of Alexander into a powerful alliance. "It's done," she said as he slid into the passenger seat. Isabella took the bait exactly as predicted. Alexander checked his phone, noting multiple missed calls from his wife. "She's probably discovering right now that the offshore account isn't quite as secure as she was promised," he thought. Rachel pulled into traffic, heading toward her law office. "The civil suits are ready. Once the federal indictments drop, we'll hit them with everything. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conspiracy. The Harrison Foundation. Diana has provided everything we need. Isabella has been falsifying provenance documents for months. The Foundation's board will vote to remove her this afternoon. Alexander's phone rang. Isabella again. He declined the call, remembering Edward Kane's words. When you strike, boy, make sure every blow lands exactly as intended. At the gallery, Isabella stared at her computer screen in growing panic. Every attempt to access the offshore account failed. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Julie's number. The money's gone, she hissed when he answered. The transfer failed. Impossible. Julie, she snapped. I checked those accounts myself. Try again. I've tried 6 times. Isabella's voice rose, drawing concerned looks from the gallery staff. She lowered her voice. Something's wrong. And Alexander, he barely reacted to my message. He should be furious, calling, threatening. Maybe he hasn't seen it yet. But no, he responded simply, enjoy. Good luck with that. That's not like him. Isabella's stomach churned. Sebastian, I'm scared. What if meet me at the studio? He cut her off. Don't talk to anyone. Don't call anyone else. Just come now. Isabella grabbed her designer bag. Hurrying past Elena's desk without noticing her attentive observation, Elena waited until Isabella disappeared into the elevator before making a call. She's heading to a studio, Elena reported. She looks rattled. Stay at your post, Alexander instructed. Document everything she leaves behind. In his Crescent Park studio, Sebastian paced frantically, phone pressed to his ear. Diego, something's wrong. The accounts aren't working. I told you, idiota. Diego snarled from Valencia. Blackwood isn't like the others. Our contacts warned us. Shut up and help me fix this. Sebastian ran his fingers through his hair, disheveling his carefully styled look. What about the buyers for the forgeries? They're going dark, all of them. Diego's voice turned urgent. Sebastian, listen to me. Get out. Now. Take whatever cash you have. The line went dead. Sebastian stared at his phone, repeatedly trying to reconnect. Nothing happened. His other contacts' numbers returned similar results, all dead or disconnected. Isabella burst into the studio, mascara smeared from tears. Everything's frozen. All my accounts, credit cards, even my family's emergency fund. Calm down, Sebastian said, grabbing her shoulders. This is just a technical problem. We'll figure it out. No, Isabella pulled away, pacing. You don't understand. Alexander, he doesn't get angry. He gets even. This is how he operates. He's just a rich tech guy. Sebastian scoffed. But, is he? Isabella spun to face him. Did you actually research him, or did you just see dollar signs and a supposedly naive wife? Before Sebastian could respond, both their phones chimed simultaneously with email notifications. Isabella opened the first one and felt her knees weaken. No, she whispered as she scrolled through email after email. Gallery owners, collectors, museum directors, all canceling upcoming shows, demanding authenticity reviews of recent acquisitions. Sebastian's face turned ashen as he read his own messages. Every major buyer who had expressed interest in his work was withdrawing. Galleries in Metro City, San Diego, and elsewhere were sending identical messages. Due to recent information received, we must terminate our relationship immediately. Isabella's phone rang. It was Diana Harrison. She answered on speaker, her hand shaking. The board just voted. Diana's voice was ice cold. You're done at the Foundation, Isabella. Security is packing your office now. In Isabella, she realized, Father knows everything. The call ended. Isabella sank onto Sebastian's paint-stained couch, her designer dress collecting dust and dried paint. What have we done? What have I done? She whispered. Sebastian wasn't listening. He was staring out his studio window at a black SUV parked across the street. Through the tinted windows, He could just make out Samuel Drake's outline, phone raised and documenting everything. "We need to run," he murmured, grabbing a duffel bag and starting to shove clothes and cash inside. Then a heavy knock at the door froze them both. "Mr. Rivera, FBI. We need you to open the door." Isabella's scream caught in her throat as she realized the true magnitude of her mistake. She had thought she was escaping a controlling husband for passionate love. Instead, she had walked straight into a trap years in the making. Across town, Alexander Blackwood raised a glass with Rachel Chen, watching real-time footage of the scene unfolding in Sebastian's studio. Rachel, studying reports on her tablet regarding art fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion, noted that Isabella had no idea what she was really involved in. Did she? She had wanted excitement. Alexander's voice carried no emotion. "I'd say she found it." The text message that had started it all remained on his phone, a trophy of sorts. Isabella had tried to humiliate him, to strike at his pride with her foolish taunt and her longtime lover. Instead, she had simply given him the final piece of evidence needed to spring a trap 3 months in the making. His phone buzzed. Samuel Drake reporting in. "FBI has Sebastian in custody. Isabella is being questioned. Want us to intervene?" "No," Alexander replied, remembering Edward Kane's lessons about patience and precision. "Let her experience every second of what she's chosen." He ended the call, turning to Rachel. "Shall we begin the next phase?" Rachel nodded, pulling out a thick folder of legal documents. The real war was just beginning, but that would be another act. For now, Alexander savored the perfection of this final. A masterpiece of revenge, served at precisely the right temperature. Rachel Chen stood in her corner office at Chen & Associates, studying the wall of documents detailing Alexander Blackwood's methodical destruction of Isabella's world, the daughter of a businessman, Edward Kane, who had been systematically ruined. Rachel had spent years plotting her own revenge against the Blackwood name. Now fate had given her something better. A chance to be part of a masterpiece of retribution. "The class action paperwork is ready," her associate announced, placing another stack of documents on her desk. 23 of Sebastian Rivera's previous victims have signed on. Rachel nodded, remembering her first meeting with Alexander 3 years ago. She had walked into his office planning to destroy him, only to discover a kindred spirit who understood the true art of vengeance. Her phone buzzed. Alexander Blackwood calling. "The federal indictments are moving faster than expected," he said. She answered without preamble. "Isabella's legal team is scrambling." "Good. What about the Harrison Foundation angle?" "Diana has been invaluable. The evidence she provided of Isabella's document falsification is devastating." Rachel pulled up a digital file. "But there's something else you should see. I'm on my way." Alexander arrived 20 minutes later, his presence commanding immediate attention from Rachel's staff. She led him to her private conference room, where Diana Harrison was waiting. "Show him," Rachel instructed. Diana spread photographs across the table, surveillance shots from Valencia, showing her with Diego Rivera years ago. "I wasn't just involved with Diego," she explained. "I witnessed their operation firsthand. The forgeries, the money laundering, all of it. Why come forward now?" Alexander studied her face. "Because Isabella didn't just betray you, she betrayed our family name." Diana's voice hardened. "The foundation our grandfather built is being used to launder her money for international criminals. That ends now." Alexander examined the photos. These proved Diego's direct involvement. "Better," Diana continued as she produced a USB drive. "Diego liked to keep records. He called it insurance. This contains account numbers, contact lists, details of their entire European operation." Rachel inserted the drive into her laptop, her eyes widening as she scrolled through the files. "This is a gold mine. With this, we can trace their entire network." "There's more?" Alexander inquired. Diana leaned forward. "Bernard Whitmore's gallery. It's not just a gallery. It's a front for a joint FBI-Interpol operation. It has been for years. Alexander's expression remained neutral, but his eyes gleamed with predatory interest. And how do you know this? Diana met his gaze. After what Diego did to me, I made it my mission to understand their operation. Bernard recruited me 2 years ago. Rachel's phone buzzed. Samuel Drake was requesting an urgent meeting. Send him up, she instructed her assistant. Samuel arrived minutes later, his military bearing at odds with the legal office's corporate atmosphere. Sir, we've identified the Russian connections. Isabella and Sebastian met with representatives of 3 oligarchs last week. They're planning to move forged masterpieces through San Diego galleries, Samuel reported. Alexander turned to Rachel. How does this affect our timeline? It accelerates everything, Rachel replied, pulling up a calendar. The Russians' involvement gives us federal leverage. We can go after their entire operation. Legitimate businesses, personal assets, everything. Diana added, once they see this evidence, Isabella will be removed from all positions of authority. Alexander nodded to Samuel. Increase surveillance. I want everything. Phone calls, meetings, financial transactions. If they discuss even coffee, I want to know about it. Already done, Samuel replied. I've assembled a team. Former special forces, all personally vetted. We're monitoring both targets 24/7. Rachel studied Alexander's expression, recognizing the same calculating intensity from their first meeting. The look he had when he outlined his plan to help her achieve justice against her father's destroyers. Isabella is going to fight back, she warned. Once she realizes the scope of what's happening, let her. Alexander's voice carried absolute conviction. Each attempt to escape will only tighten the noose. Diana gathered her photos. The Foundation's legal team will cooperate fully. Isabella's actions have put our entire family's reputation at risk. Speaking of risk, Samuel interjected. Our sources indicate Sebastian is planning to move several forged pieces through the Foundation's next exhibition. He doesn't seem aware of the switch. Perfect, Alexander replied. Alexander turned to Rachel. How long to prepare the civil suits? The paperwork is ready. We've documented losses exceeding 30 million from Sebastian's previous scams. Once we add recovery multipliers, follow them tomorrow. All of them. Alexander ordered. Alexander stood. Diana, make sure the Foundation's board understands the full scope of Isabella's activities. Samuel, I want your team ready to move the moment the Russians make contact. Rachel watched him leave, remembering how she had once hated him for his connection to Edward Kane. Now she understood. Kane had taught them both that revenge wasn't about quick satisfaction. It was about patience, precision, and the absolute destruction of one's enemies. She turned back to her documents, a slight smile playing on her lips. Isabella's Blackwood was about to learn that lesson the hard way. As the pressure mounted, Alexander's plan entered its final stages. Sebastian paced in his studio, now emptying a valuable artwork as galleries demanded returns and buyers threatened legal action. His phone rang. Diego, finally calling from Valencia. They're closing in. Diego's voice shook with fear. Interpol raided our workshop this morning. They have everything. Records, client lists, physical evidence of forgeries. How? Sebastian demanded. We were careful, but someone talked, someone who knew our operation from the inside. Diego replied, pausing. Sebastian, they're offering deals. Early cooperation means lighter sentences. You wouldn't dare, Sebastian snarled. I have a family here, children. I can't risk everything for your romantic adventure with a rich man's wife. The line went dead. Sebastian hurled his phone against the wall, watching it shatter like his carefully constructed plans. Isabella's situation was equally dire. She sat before the Harrison Foundation's board. Diana's evidence spread across the mahogany table like a prosecutor's exhibit. Falsified provenance documents. Diana pointed to specific papers, altered dates, forged signatures, fabricated ownership histories, all tied directly to your authorization. I can explain, Isabella began, but her father cut her off. Explain. You've destroyed our family's reputation. The foundation our grandfather built is now linked to international art fraud. William Harrison's voice trembled with rage. Daddy, please, don't patronize me. You're done here. Security will escort you out. Isabella fled the boardroom, tears streaking her expensive makeup. Her phone was filled with missed calls from Sebastian, but a more urgent notification caught her eye. Her credit cards had been declined for suspicious activity. At Blackwood Securities, Samuel updated Alexander on the unfolding chaos. Diego is talking to Interpol. He's offering evidence against Sebastian and their entire network. And the Russians, they're getting nervous. Their Metro City contacts are going dark, trying to distance themselves from the operation. Alexander reviewed surveillance footage of Isabella leaving the foundation. Rachel, the civil suits are expanding. More victims are coming forward by the hour. The press is starting to pick up the story. Detective Martinez is being called, adding another layer of pressure. Alexander, my unit's ready to move. The evidence trail is solid. Money laundering, fraud, conspiracy. Isabella's looking at serious federal time. Good. Make sure all transactions are documented. When you move, I want no loose ends, Alexander instructed. In her apartment, Isabella faced financial ruin. Each attempt to access emergency funds revealed Alexander's true financial genius. Accounts frozen, credit lines closed, even her trust fund locked behind legal barriers. How? She whispered, staring at her computer screen. How did he do this? The answer lay in Alexander's patient accumulation of evidence, his strategic positioning of allies, and his absolute commitment to destroying those who betrayed him. Isabella had thought she was escaping a controlling husband. Instead, she had challenged a master strategist, taught by one of the most ruthless businessmen in Newport City. Sebastian's increasingly desperate calls went unanswered as Isabella realized the true extent of her situation. Her lover was revealed as a fraud. Her family had disowned her, and her professional reputation was destroyed. Alexander hadn't just attacked their plan. He had systematically dismantled their entire world. In Rachel Chen's office, the final piece fell into place. The federal indictments are ready, she informed Alexander. Once they drop, there's no going back. Good, Alexander murmured as he studied the city lights, remembering Henry Collins's lessons about patience and power. Let them feel the pressure build. Tomorrow, we end this. The chess game was reaching its conclusion, each move calculated to maximize destruction. Isabella and Sebastian had thought themselves players, only to discover they were merely pieces on a board controlled by a grandmaster of revenge. Bernard Whitmore, FBI special agent, stood in his command center, surrounded by surveillance feeds and strike team coordinators. The culmination of years of investigation into international art fraud was about to unfold. All teams were in position. Samuel Drake's voice crackled through the secure channel. His former Special Forces unit had positions around Sebastian's studio, the gallery, and Isabella's apartment. Interpol teams were reporting ready in Valencia and Bern. Another agent announced, San Diego field office standing by. Bernard nodded to the operation commander. Execute, he ordered. The raids happened simultaneously across 3 continents. In Valencia, Interpol agents stormed Diego Rivera's forgery workshop, seizing computers, documents, and dozens of partially completed forgeries. In Bern, Swiss authorities froze accounts connected to the Rivera brothers' operation. In San Diego, FBI teams secured galleries and warehouses linked to the Russian oligarchs. Isabella sat in her office, unaware of the approaching storm. She was still trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her life when the first agents entered. FBI. Hands where we can see them, she heard. She looked up to see Elena Vargas leading a team of agents, her assisting demeanor completely transformed. Gone was the timid gallery worker, replaced by a seasoned federal agent. Elena, Isabella whispered. What is this? Isabella Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and interstate transportation of stolen property, Elena announced as she approached with handcuffs. We've been building this case for 3 years. 3 years? But you only started working here. I was placed here specifically to monitor the Rivera brothers' operation. Elena secured the cuffs. Your relationship with Sebastian gave us the final pieces we needed. Across town, Sebastian's attempt to flee ended violently. He had made it to his car when Samuel Drake's team surrounded him. It's over, Rivera, Samuel called out. Federal agents were positioned front and back. No way out. Sebastian gunned the engine, aiming for what he thought was a gap in the perimeter. But the reinforced SUV that appeared in his path proved him wrong. The collision left him unconscious and bleeding, his dreams of escape as shattered as his vehicle's windshield. Target secured, Samuel reported, watching paramedics load Sebastian into an ambulance. He'll live to face charges. In Valencia, Diego Rivera sat in an Interpol interrogation room, facing decades in prison. His lawyer pushed a cooperation agreement across the table. Full immunity is impossible, the prosecutor explained, but substantial assistance could significantly reduce your sentence. Diego thought of his children, of the life he had built. I'll tell you everything. About Sebastian. The forgeries, all of it, he agreed. Isabella's phone call to Diego from her holding cell received a cold response. I'm sorry, Isabella. I've made my deal. You should do the same. At Blackwood Securities, Alexander watched the operation unfold through multiple live feeds. Rachel Chen sat beside him, legal documents spread across his desk. The federal prosecutor is willing to deal. They want Isabella's cooperation against the Russian buyers, she informed him. No deals. Alexander's voice was granite. She chose to fight. Let her face the consequences, even if it means more prison time, especially then. Alexander pulled up footage of Isabella being led from the gallery in handcuffs. She thought she could humiliate me, take my money, destroy what I built. Now she learns the price of that mistake. Detective Sarah Martinez entered with a thick file. The Financial Crimes Unit has documented over 50 suspicious transactions. With the recovery enhancements, we're looking at major time. And Sebastian's injuries? Rachel asked. Nothing fatal. He'll recover in time for his arraignment. Sarah replied with a sharp smile, though he might wish otherwise when he sees the evidence against him. On the screens, they watched Isabella's perp walk broadcast live on local news. The distinguished curator, the socialite from old money, led away like a common criminal. Her family name, once a shield against consequences, now magnified her disgrace. Elena's revelation as an undercover agent devastated Isabella's last hopes. The assistant she had trusted, confided in, had been gathering evidence against her for years. Each conversation about Sebastian, each altered document, each suspicious transaction had been carefully documented and added to the federal case. Your fingerprints are on multiple forged provenance documents, Elena explained during Isabella's initial interrogation. We have recordings of you discussing fraudulent sales with Sebastian, footage of you facilitating meetings with Russian buyers. I didn't know, Isabella protested weakly. I thought they were legitimate collectors. The same way you thought Sebastian was a legitimate artist, Elena retorted, pushing photographs across the table. Images of Sebastian meeting with art thieves, Diego's forgery workshop documenting fake forgeries that you helped authenticate. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you'll pay for it. In his command center, Bernard Whitmore compiled the day's successes minus 17 arrests across 3 countries, hundreds of forged artworks recovered, and millions in illegal assets frozen. And the Russians? Alexander asked through the secure line. They're running scared. Their Metro City operation is completely exposed. We'll roll up their entire network within weeks, Bernard replied. Alexander ended the call, turning to Rachel. Prepare the divorce papers. Make sure she understands there's no room for negotiation. Already done, Rachel replied, holding up a document along with evidence of her tax evasion schemes. If she fights the divorce, we'll destroy her entire family's financial structure. The sun set on a day that had shattered multiple criminal enterprises and destroyed countless lives. In various holding cells, the consequences of betraying Alexander Blackwood became brutally clear. He hadn't just defeated them. He had orchestrated their complete destruction. Isabella sat in the Federal Detention Center's interview room, facing Rachel Chen across a steel table. The divorce papers waited between them, a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. The terms are simple, Rachel explained, her voice professional but laced with satisfaction. You sign, admitting fault, and forfeiting all claims to marital assets. In return, Alexander won't provide additional evidence to the federal prosecutors. Additional evidence? Isabella asked, her designer outfit now wrinkled from hours in custody, seeming like a costume from another life. Rachel opened a folder and spread photographs across the table. Evidence of tax fraud, money laundering through family accounts, and altered financial statements dating back 3 years. She paused. Your father's foundation will not survive this level of scrutiny. He's threatening my entire family. Isabella's voice shook with rage and fear. No, Isabella. You threatened your family when you chose to participate in international art fraud, Rachel retorted, gathering the photos. Alexander is simply showing you the consequences of your choices. Down the hall, Sebastian faced his own impossible situation. His lawyer reviewed the mountain of evidence, surveillance photos, recorded conversations, financial records, testimony from his own brother. They have everything, the lawyer admitted. The FBI has been building this case for years, your brother's testimony alone. Sebastian's protest died as his lawyer played a recording of his brother's detailed confession. The prosecutors might make a deal if you cooperate, give them the Russian buyers and explain how the forgery operation worked, the lawyer suggested. No deals. Alexander Blackwood's voice came from the doorway as he entered the interview room, his presence filling the space. Mr. Rivera gambled everything on destroying my life. Now he pays the full price. Sebastian lunged across the table, but federal marshals restrained him before he could stand. They dragged him away, his screams and threats echoing through the detention center's corridors. In the federal courthouse, Bernard Whitmore testified before a grand jury, laying out the full scope of the Rivera brothers' operation. The organization operated across multiple countries, he explained, displaying evidence on large screens. They targeted wealthy collectors, galleries, even respected institutions. Isabella Blackwood's position at the Harrison Foundation had provided crucial legitimacy to their schemes. The grand jury examined documents showing Isabella's knowing participation, emails discussing forged artworks, recordings of conversations with buyers, bank records proving her share of fraudulent sales. Diana Harrison watched from the gallery, her face a mask of controlled fury. The family name she had worked so hard to protect was now dragged through federal court, linked to international crime rings. Diana informed Alexander after the session. The foundation's board has voted. Isabella's removal is permanent. We're implementing new authentication procedures and stronger oversight. Blackwood Securities will handle your digital security. No charge. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Alexander offered. Diana nodded, understanding the message. Her cooperation in destroying Isabella had earned her family a powerful ally in rebuilding their reputation. Rachel arrived with updates from various fronts. Isabella's lawyer tried floating a deal, trading information about the Russian buyers for leniency and showing them the tax fraud evidence, but he withdrew the offer. Rachel reported with a predatory smile. The Russians are falling apart anyway. 3 oligarchs indicted this morning, their entire art smuggling network exposed. Isabella's decision to fight the divorce has triggered Alexander's final phase, she continued. I filed sealed documents with the SEC, IRS, and federal prosecutors, exposing decades of financial manipulation within the Harrison family's businesses. You're destroying your own in-laws. Detective Martinez asked, reviewing the evidence. Alexander replied simply, Isabella's father thought his money and influence would protect her, but he learns that lesson ends today. In her cell, Isabella received notice after notice. Family accounts frozen. Trust funds suspended. Foundation assets under federal review. Each new blow stripped away another piece of the privileged life she had taken for granted. Her father's message was brief. You've brought down everything our family built. Don't expect help. We're fighting for survival now. Bernard Whitmore continued building his case, presenting evidence to stunned gallery owners and figures in the art world. Isabella's colleagues and former friends recoiled at the depth of her involvement in Sebastian's schemes. She had authenticated forged masterpieces, used her foundation connections to create false provenance papers, and facilitated sales to Russian oligarchs knowing the art was stolen or forged. The art world's rejection was complete and irreversible. Isabella's name became toxic, her professional relationships destroyed beyond repair, and the social circles she had once ruled now shunned any connection to her. Alexander watched it all unfold with cold satisfaction. Edward Kane had taught him that true revenge went beyond personal destruction. It eliminated any possibility of recovery or redemption. 1 year later, Alexander stood in Blackwood Security's new headquarters, now the premier art security consulting firm in North America. The company had expanded rapidly, adding specialized teams for art authentication, provenance verification, and fraud prevention. Rachel Chen entered his office, no longer just his lawyer, but a full partner in both business and life. Their shared understanding of justice and revenge had forged a connection deeper than either had expected. The final appeals have been denied, Rachel announced. Sebastian's 20-year sentence stands. Additional charges in Europe will keep him incarcerated even longer. Alexander nodded, examining reports from his global security teams. The art world had changed dramatically since Isabella's arrest. Museums and collectors worldwide now relied on Blackwood Securities to protect their investments. Isabella's sentencing is next week, Rachel continued. The prosecutor expects substantial prison time, and the civil suits will consume whatever assets she has left. Diana Harrison arrived for their weekly meeting, her family's foundation now a model of security and authenticity verification. The new authentication protocols are working perfectly. 3 forged pieces identified last month alone. The Harrison name is stronger than ever, she reported. Alexander noted, Your father must be pleased. He understands who made that possible. Detective Martinez, now Chief Martinez of the FBI's expanded Art Crimes Task Force, joined them with updates on international operations. The Rivera network is completely dismantled, she reported. Diego is serving his reduced sentence in Spain. The Russian oligarch's art smuggling operations are finished, and your security protocols are becoming the industry standard. Samuel entered last, his team now an elite unit specializing in art theft prevention and recovery. The Dubai operation was successful. 3 stolen masterpieces recovered, and the forgery ring disbanded, he reported. Alexander surveyed his expanded empire with satisfaction. Isabella's betrayal had opened unexpected opportunities, transforming Blackwood Securities into a global force in art world security. The text message that had started everything sat framed on his wall. Bye, you fool. Me and my longtime boyfriend are taking your money to Metro City. Don't try to look for us, or you'll regret everything. Below it, his response. Enjoy. Good luck with that. Those words had launched a revenge so complete that it reshaped an industry. Isabella faced years in federal prison. Sebastian's art career was destroyed. His name became synonymous with fraud. The Rivera family's criminal empire lay in ruins. The Brighton Gallery Conference confirmed our expansion plans, Rachel reported while reviewing their international contracts. 5 major museums have signed on for full security overhauls. Diana added, the Harrison Foundation's new authentication program launches next month. We're already receiving inquiries from collectors worldwide. Alexander studied the city's skyline. the same view from which he had first learned of Isabella's betrayal. Now it represented something different. Not merely the height he had achieved, but the foundation for something greater. What really happened with Edward Kane? Rachel asked quietly after the others left. You never told me the full story. He taught me that revenge isn't about quick satisfaction. It's about patient, absolute destruction. About turning your enemy's betrayal into your greatest victory. Rachel moved closer, understanding in her eyes, just like we did. Better. Alexander gestured to the empire they had built from the ashes of betrayal. We didn't just destroy our enemies. We transformed their world. The lights of Newport City glittered below, each one representing a connection in their new network of power and influence. Alexander had taken Isabella's attempt to humiliate him and turned it into a triumph beyond anything he had imagined. In her prison cell, Isabella saw news reports of Blackwood Securities' latest expansion. Each announcement drove home the magnitude of her mistake. She had thought Alexander cold, controlled, predictable. But instead, she had challenged a man who had learned revenge at the feet of a master, who had turned betrayal into an art form. Alexander's new relationship with Rachel wasn't born from weakness or need, but from shared strength and understanding. Together, they had built something that went beyond revenge, to reshape an entire industry. The text message remained on his wall, not as a wound to nurse, but as a trophy commemorating the moment an enemy's greatest attack became the catalyst for his greatest victory. 10 years later, Alexander Blackwood's office at Blackwood Securities' global headquarters dominated the Newport City skyline. It was the culmination of a decade that had transformed a cybersecurity firm into an international powerhouse. At 52, he had built an empire that controlled art security, authentication, and fraud prevention across 4 continents. Latest numbers from the Osaka office, Rachel Chen Blackwood said, entering with a tablet. Their marriage 5 years ago had merged more than just their personal lives. Her legal expertise had helped expand Blackwood Securities into Asian markets previously considered impenetrable. The Narration Museum authentication program caught 3 forgeries last month alone. The new AI-based verification system that Samuel's team developed is revolutionary. Rachel set the tablet down. Speaking of Samuel, Alexander nodded. Samuel Drake has transformed our security division into the most respected art protection force globally. His team now protects major museums, private collections, and international exhibitions. How's the Dubai operation? Recovered the stolen Vermeer. Samuel is leading the transport team personally. Rachel pulled up surveillance feeds showing Samuel's tactical unit escorting an armored vehicle. The insurance companies are increasing our contracts again. Alexander accessed his secure terminal, reviewing updates from his global network. The art security landscape had changed dramatically since Isabella's betrayal had sparked his expansion into the field. Diana Harrison just called. Rachel continued. The Foundation's 10th Annual Art Authentication Conference starts next week. They're expecting over 1,000 participants. The Harrison Foundation has risen from the ashes of Isabella's disgrace to become a leading force in art world integrity. Diana is turning the conference into a recruitment event. Rachel noted, top forensic experts, authentication specialists, security consultants. Everyone wants to work with Blackwood Securities or the Harrison Foundation now. Alexander allowed himself a small smile. The empire he had built from Isabella's betrayal had grown beyond revenge into something that transformed an entire industry. The art world's criminals now feared 2 names above all others, Blackwood and Harrison. Samuel's face appeared on the secure video link. Sir, Vermeer's secured at the burn facility. Local authorities are requesting our authentication team for suspected forgeries at 3 major galleries. Deploy Alpha Team. Full protocol. Alexander instructed. Rachel watched the burn operation unfold on multiple screens. I just realized that the burn facility is where we first tracked Isabella and Sebastian's accounts. Now we use it to protect billions in legitimate art. Alexander pulled up their global facility network. secure storage and authentication centers on every continent, each built to standards that made Fort Knox look casual. Elena Vargas' team reported next. Another forgery ring uncovered, this one attempting to infiltrate Asian markets. The technique I developed while investigating Isabella now protects institutions worldwide. Board meeting in 10 minutes, Rachel reminded him. Quarterly review of global operations. Alexander gathered his materials, each document representing another piece of the empire he had built from betrayal. The board meeting would show record growth across all divisions: security, authentication, recovery, and consulting. The corporate jet waited to fly them to Brighton afterward. A major auction house had discovered suspicious pieces in a private collection. Blackwood Securities' reputation meant they were always the first called when questions arose. Isabella tried to access her old Foundation email last week, Rachel mentioned as they headed to the boardroom. The system flagged it immediately. She still doesn't understand. There's no way back into this world for her. She never understood what she was really dealing with. She never did. Alexander replied. None of them did. The boardroom offered a panoramic view of Newport City's financial district. Directors from global operations joined virtually, their faces on screens from different time zones, each representing a division of the empire that had grown from Alexander's revenge. Blackwood Securities' quarterly review. Alexander began, surveying his creation. Our global operations report. Sandwell's security division has expanded to 5,000 personnel worldwide. Elena's undercover teams operate in 30 countries. Our authentication labs employ hundreds of specialists. And Diana's foundation has partnered with major museums globally. 10 years ago, a betrayal meant to destroy us became the foundation of something unprecedented. Alexander addressed the board. Today, we don't just prevent art fraud. We've changed how the entire art world operates. The numbers supported his statement. Blackwood Securities' market value had grown exponentially, and their influence extended from auction houses to insurance companies, from private collectors to national museums. After the meeting, Alexander and Rachel prepared for their Brighton flight. The jet would refuel in Metro City, where Bernard Whitmore would join them for the auction house investigation. Diana sent over the confirmed conference speaker list, Rachel said as they drove to the airport. Leaders from major auction houses, top museums worldwide, even the Louvre's new authentication chief is attending. All because Isabella thought she could take a shortcut to wealth and excitement. Alexander mused. She never realized she was just a pawn in a larger game. The private terminal displayed Blackwood Securities' logo, now one of the most recognized brands in international art and security. Alexander remembered the day Isabella's text had announced her betrayal. She had called him a loser, run off with a younger man, thinking she was escaping to a more exciting life. Now he controlled an industry. Isabella worked retail in Cedar Grove. Sebastian sat in federal prison. Their betrayal had given him the opportunity to build something beyond their comprehension. Rachel touched his arm as they boarded the jet. You didn't just get revenge. You revolutionized an entire industry. Alexander nodded, remembering Edward Kane's lessons about patient, absolute revenge. Kane had taught him to destroy enemies completely, but Alexander had gone further. He turned his enemy's betrayal into the foundation of unprecedented success. The jet lifted off into the night sky. Somewhere in Cedar Grove, Isabella would be closing a frame shop, returning to her small apartment, cut off forever from the world she had once inhabited. In federal prison, Sebastian counted days until a release that would only lead to more charges in Europe. And Alexander Blackwood, the man they had tried to destroy, flew toward Brighton to protect billions in art. His name was now synonymous with trust and security in an industry his revenge had transformed. The empire built from betrayal continued to grow, a testament that the deadliest revenge wasn't just about destroying enemies, but about using their betrayal to achieve heights they could never have imagined.